have Cathie Landsburg. She's the support worker and advocate for the Canadian Mental Health Association.
This is what we're talking about, stress and mental health. So what does stress have to do with mental health and mental illness? That's the big question that we're going to talk about. So this is the continuum I was telling you about. The distinction between mental health and mental illness isn't well understood, and sometimes the terms are used interchangeably. So we're all in a state of mental health, the same as we're all in the state of physical health. And like physical health, we're all somewhere on the continuum. And in a sense, it's like the weather. So it's the emotional and the psychological climate in which we live. And just as the weather is created by systems that come into the environment, especially in Nova Scotia, so too is our mental health affected by circumstances and experiences of our lives. So mental health is essentially about coping with the stressors and the challenges of life. Everybody has them, but the way we cope varies. And our mental health varies greatly depending on what's happening in our life. So loss or job change or work stress. Strong financial supports and support networks, they can help with a person's ability to cope and the challenges and the difficulties in life. Nobody gets through life without a mental health problem of some kind because we all experience change and loss and stress. And so most of us are able to go back to our natural equilibrium. Whoops, skipped mental illness. So mental illnesses are medically diagnosable disorders. And research indicates a genetic predisposition is involved, so inherited somewhat like diabetes, which makes certain people more vulnerable to developing these illnesses. And external stressors can trigger the development of a mental illness. And mental illness involves biochemical changes in the brain. And these changes in brain chemistry cause changes in thought and feeling and behavior, which are symptoms of mental illness the same way pain and fever are symptoms of physical illness. So changes in thought, feeling, and behavior, those are the symptoms of mental illness. So it makes mental illness more difficult to understand because it may appear that the individual's personality has changed and you can't see the symptoms that the person is experiencing. So this is how they intersect. So the vertical slide represents the mental health that we all have. And on any given day, our mental health can go from good to poor to good again. I might get up in the morning, the sun's shining, good tunes playing on the radio, I'm on time, I had a good night's sleep. My mental health's pretty good. Then I get to the office and my coworker's out sick and I just remembered I forgot to do an important piece of work and my boss is off and I don't know what I'm supposed to do and I have nobody to problem solve with. My stress level goes up and my mental health might dip a little bit, but it'll probably begin to improve as these temporary stressors are resolved. But if my life stressors are divorce, child custody problems, finances, loss, illness, death, I'm not going to be so quick to recover from poor mental health. And if I have no support system in place, and I have huge financial stressors or other stressors, then I may slip into mental illness or quadrant 4. On the other hand, I may have a mental illness, but I have no symptoms right now. I'm earning a living wage. I have supportive friends, family, coworkers. I can be in quadrant 3. That is, I have a mental illness, but I have good mental health. So let's just look over these quadrants, okay? So in quadrant 1, I have good mental health. I have no mental illness. In quadrant 2, I have no mental illness, I have no mental illness, but I have poor mental health. In quadrant 3, I have a mental illness, but I have good mental health. And in number 4, I have a mental illness. I also have poor mental health. The stigma comes in because people think that everyone who has mental illness is in quadrant 4. And that's just not true. So I had depression. I had depression badly in 2003. I had all kinds of symptoms. So I had a mental illness and I had poor mental health. Right now, I have all of this stuff going on that's so great. I still have mental illness, but now I have good mental health. So you see how you can go from place to place, right? It's not mutually exclusive. So, is that clear? Does that make sense? All right, good. So, we talked about the continuums of mental health and mental illness, and you can see how circumstances change the balance of our mental health. So let's talk about some of the causes of mental illness. Do you notice anything here that I was so subtle about by putting in red? So, genetic predisposition, we've talked about biological factors with the brain chemistry. Situational stress, you know, oftentimes things don't just happen one thing, right? One thing happens and then something else happens and then something else happens. And when you're on the continuum, if you're going along and something happens and you dip, well, then usually you can go right back up. But if you're going along and something happens and then something happens and then something happens, it's a lot harder to get back up to that balanced area. So situational psychological stress in terms of the supports in your life and traumatic experience, those can all cause mental illness. So let's talk about stress. In small doses, stress can help us stay focused and it increases our energy levels. And the surge of adrenaline feels good, we're pumped, we're ready to take on the world. But as the pressure increases, the stress reaches a point where we can no longer cope with it in a positive way. And we feel stressed out, no longer capable of handling it. And if the pressure doesn't ease, the situation can spiral out of control. We feel like the world's crashing down on us, and it can be devastating. The results can be devastating. So there's 3 different definitions that I put on here. So the body's reaction to a change that requires a physical, mental, or an emotional adjustment, and it can come from any situation that makes you feel frustrated or angry or nervous or agitated. It also is a condition or a feeling experience when a person perceives, which I'm going to come back to, that the demands exceed the personal and social resources that the person has at hand. And also the adverse reaction people have to excessive pressures or other types of demands placed on them. Sure.
So number 3 is when they don't perceive it, it actually does exceed.
Exactly.
So
And part of it goes a little hand in hand, but yeah, for sure. And there's a slide that we're going to talk about with those demands too. So sources of stress. The environment can bombard you with intense and competing demands to adjust. You know, it's April 26th and I don't really see a sign of spring. You know, so for some people, the environment, that's a difficult stressor. And you're just thinking, when's summer going to get here? When is summer going to get here? Winter's too long. Things like the news. You know, last week, we were bombarded with images, with sounds, with graphic descriptions about Boston. You know, those are bombarded. Those cause stress in your life. Crime, technology, being disengaged from each other and engaged in our handheld whatevers. You know, those are things that can cause stress. Social stressors. We can experience many stressors at the same time because of all the different hats we wear. So as an employee, as a parent, as a child of aging parent, as a coworker, there's all different things, and depending on the stressors coming at you, they can come from all those different areas. Physiological, so changes in our body that can cause stress in our life. So menopause or illness or poor nutrition or lack of sleep. Those are all things that can have stressors, sources of stress on us. And then our thoughts. Our brain interprets and perceives situations as stressful, difficult, painful, or pleasant. And many situations in life can be stress-provoking, but it's our thoughts that determine whether or not they're a problem for us. And we're going to talk in detail about that a little bit later. So here's what we talked about in terms of your resources and your demands and how the scales work. So you may have resources with supportive relationships and good health habits and work-life balance and involvement and positive attitude. Those can be all great resources. And then your demands can be your workload or parenting, finances. You'll see relationships are on both sides. They can be supportive or they can be maybe a demand. illness, and then self-defeating habits. So really, it's about how are your scales? What are your resources? What are your demands? And how do you keep those balanced? And when your scales are out of balance, then your life is out of balance. Signs and symptoms of stress overload. It's important to realize when our stress levels are out of control or affecting us negatively. The signs and symptoms of stress overload can be varied. Stress affects the mind and the body and behavior, and everybody experiences things different. So there's some people who may get agitated and angry when they're stressed out and they're keyed up and heated and ready for a fight, overly emotional. Other people may shut down or space out, become withdrawn, and then other people may just freeze, like a tense thing. I'm paralyzed, I can't do anything, but inside you're just like all turned up. So the responses again are different. So take a look at this. I know there's a lot of them, but I really wanted to make the point that there's a lot of signs and symptoms of stress that people don't recognize as stress. And they can affect cognitively, emotionally, physically, behaviorally. And I didn't actually even get them all fit on this slide. So take a look and see if anything looks familiar to you. Recognize any? Yeah, exactly. So this list contains some warning signs and symptoms of stress. And the more signs and symptoms that you notice that you have, the closer you get to stress overload. So right from inability to concentrate or seeing all the negative things in life, to chest pain, to procrastination, to agitation, feeling overwhelmed, panic attacks, blaming, there are all kinds of different things that are signs of stress. There's, you may notice some people who, I know someone who scurries, like doesn't walk from one event to the next, doesn't walk from one thing to the next, it's a scurry. So walking in a rushed way from one thing to another, regularly thinking about the past or the future, unable to kind of be present in the present. And then just feeling the weight of the world on your shoulders. Those are all sent. You can feel it through your neck and your shoulders. Those are all signs of stress. The problem, in my opinion, in society isn't that we don't have enough resources to deal with stress. It's that we don't have a self-awareness about it and the effect that it's having on us. We don't recognize it because we're distracted by commitments, by demands, by technology, whatever it is. And we're so used to how we feel that we don't recognize it as not a good feeling. We're just so used to it, it doesn't seem abnormal. And one of the things that always strikes me is that, have you ever been in a room where somebody will say, oh, I'm so stressed, I have this and this. Well, you think that's bad. I have this and this and that. And when you think that's bad, it's like whoever is the most stressed wins the prize. But what's the prize, right? But, you all can relate to that. I see you all nodding. Exactly, right? So what's the prize for that? There is no prize. So let's talk about some strategies. We're going to go over 4 different strategies. Some of this you're going to say, I know, like the first one, which is build general health. We all know that if we exercise, that we're going to have more energy and a healthier body, and we're going to be able to get rid of some of that emotion, some of the pent-up stress, and we all know that. It's just one of the things that has to become a lifestyle, and if you have stress, it's critical in your life, so pretty much for everybody, right?
Improves the serotonin levels in the brain.
And it's, this is one struggle that I had my whole life. I defined myself as a non-athlete, and somehow on my 46th birthday, I ended up signing up for a run club. I have no idea how that even happened to this day. It was like an out-of-body experience. And so I did a learn to run 5K, thought I'll never live through this, ended up learning how to run 5K, shocking. And so I ran, and then I broke my foot in February. And I thought, oh, geez. So I wasn't able to run until last week. I was able to start running again. I cannot believe what a change in my mental health since I was able to run again. And what a change that was from when I was actually, so now, I used to say it, but I didn't actually do it. Now I'm actually believing it, what I'm saying. and what a difference that it makes in your life. And so whatever it happens to be, running, my joke was always, if you see me running, come help me, because someone's obviously chasing me. I would never do it on my own. So who knows? Maybe it's running. It could be yoga. It could be whatever, right? So find something that you like, or you think you might like, or even if you hate it. I don't love running still. I love how I feel when I'm done, but I don't love running. And maybe if you don't love it, you just have to suck it up and do it anyway. So the exercise is really important. The nutrition, talking about, Canada's food guide, whatever it is, not the diets, but the eating proper food, eating good food. I know I reach for chocolate and coffee. That's my go-to things when I'm feeling stressed. I'm not saying don't have some coffee and chocolate, but don't sustain yourself on coffee and chocolate, right? So trying to limit those things, especially in periods of stress. And sleep and rest. Nothing goes right when you're sleep deprived, right? Nothing looks good, nobody looks good, and believe me, your hot spot is like that much closer when you don't get your sleep. So sleep is critical to that. So however many hours that looks like, if it's 7, if it's 8, and also resting. For some, it's that whole stress thing too. It's how we appear, right? So if somebody had a rest in the afternoon or steps away from their stuff, it's not that they're slackers, they're smart. It's smart. Step away from your stuff, have a little rest. God, an afternoon nap, wouldn't that be just like the biggest luxury? But we get in our head like, oh no, productive people don't rest like that. You just go, go, go. Crock, total crock, right? Change the situation. That was number 2. So external stresses we talked about, they're jobs, families, relationships, living arrangements. If you have one or more of those stressors, it can't be tolerated indefinitely. At some point, it's going to break. And most times, they're seldom inescapable, so you have to kind of adapt to it. So taking time out, whether that's a vacation. Do you know people who don't take their days off or holidays? That always shocks me. There was no way in hell I'd be going to work on my day off. Really? But some people work through all those things, and those are the people that you're going to see that have their shoulders up around their ears, that are stressed. Take your days off. Take your holidays. Take your time off, right? Changing jobs, changing homes, changing relationships. Those are more drastic, but those might be the things that you need to change. And stepping out of the situation. Again, not to pick on my adolescent, but there are times when you just have to walk away. For her health, for my health. Right? There's times that you just have to step away from whoever or whatever is causing you the stress and just back away. Even leaving for a few minutes can sometimes help the situation. Time management. I have a thing on my desk that says much of the stress doesn't come from having too much to do. It comes from not finishing what you start. So that's my big reminder, the time management thing, and making sure that what you're doing, you're making the best time effective. Planning, that helps. And then you don't feel like you have the to-do list from hell waiting for you. Assertive communication. So the need to please others, that can set you up for stress. And so sometimes not speaking out for what we really need or what we really want, that can cause stress in our lives. And if we can't do or ask for clearly what it is we want, we're unlikely to get it. So if you can develop the lines of communication, that ultimately is what I discovered when I was diagnosed with depression, was that I'm a middle child, I'm a peacemaker, right? I have the disease to please. I want everybody to be happy. I don't want any ripples in my water. I want it all smooth. And if that's to the detriment of me and dropping down putting everything inside that's bothering me, that's not, then eventually you stuff all this stuff, it's got to come out somewhere, right? And so it's around being able to communicate with the people in your family or your friends or your coworkers if there's things that you're finding difficult in life, and opening up about that. And social support, having people in your life that you can trust, that feel supportive, and when you're feeling stressed, that you're able to debrief with and de-escalate with. So having that circle of support in your life is really critical too. And also to have, if that's not enough for you, to have people. I firmly believe that every adolescent should be assigned a psychologist. They need to be able to get all this stuff out. That's my own personal belief, and my kids will always have a psychologist in the wings, so they can tell them what they need to tell them. You know, when I was, just a few weeks ago when I had my broken foot and there was stuff going on in my life, I'm a mental health support worker, but that doesn't mean that I don't have difficulties with my mental health as well. So I went to a professional and said, listen, I need to talk this out because this is causing me so great stress. So having that person that you can talk to who can be objective, sometimes that's what you need too. I firmly would say, I think every person should have a psychologist, a therapist, somebody that they can talk to, especially with the way our life is right now. So speaking about our thoughts, was I speaking about our thoughts? It seemed like a good segue anyway. Let's talk about our thoughts. So when something happens to us, we automatically evaluate the situation. If we decide that the demands of the situation outweigh our skills, then we might label the situation as stressful and react with a stress response. If we decide that our coping skills are greater than the demands of the situation, then we don't see it as stressful. How we assess situations and respond to them can also be influenced by past experience. So how did that work out last time, or what did I do last time? Stress can come from any situation or thought that makes us feel frustrated, angry, fearful, anxious. Everybody sees situations differently and has different coping skills, like what you said, right? For this reason, no two people will ever respond exactly the same to the same situation. So it's not the event, but rather a person's perception and experience of event that defines whether or not it's stressful. It's a result of our thinking patterns. Our mind is a very powerful tool, and it's important to pay attention to what it's telling us and whether it's accurate or realistic and logical. And the thinking patterns that cause stress in our lives are called cognitive distortions, stinking thinking, negative thinking, whatever you want to call it. They happen automatically. And cognitive distortions and negative thinking, they are common and they keep us stressed out and stuck. So when you look at this, the world is full of positive and neutral and negative events. So something happens, we have a thought about it, we interpret and perceive the event. And that's great if our thoughts are realistic and accurate and logical. If they're illogical, you're going to get a different story. So we have the event, we have our thoughts, and that affects the feelings. So our feelings are created by the thoughts around the event, not the actual event. Does that make sense? All right. So let's talk about these little critters that sneak in when we're not looking, these cognitive distortions. So all or nothing thinking, black and white thinking, polarized thinking. Either things are good or things are bad. You're perfect or you're a failure. No gray area in your life, sirree. No sirree. So how do we combat that? We think in the middle. Think a little bit of gray in our life. It isn't this or this. And that's one of the things I do a lot of workshops for people, and we do one of the most common things that I've seen for people who have depression is all or nothing thinking. It's just like, and I'll say, is there any gray in your world? Any? No, it's black, it's white. So it's paying attention to that. Overgeneralization. So you come to a general conclusion based on a single evidence or piece of advice. If something bad happens, well, then that will only ever happen. It's like when you go into a store and you get bad service once, well, I'm never going back to that store again. Ever. Doesn't matter, there's 25 other employees, but, right? It's overgeneralizing. So check the evidence. There are no absolutes in life, right? So filtering, mental filter. You take the negative details and magnify them while kind of disqualifying the positive. And I see this with people all the time around, in disqualifying the positive. You'll say, oh, you did such a great job with this, but yeah, but I, right? And totally throw away the positive and focus on the negative. Yeah, you did a really good job on that presentation. Oh yeah, but I only, and I think there's no buts. You did a good job on the presentation. But that's the thing, people disqualify the positive. Mind reading, this is a good one. So if I walk in and I'm like this, you might think, gee, she's looking awful cranky today. I wonder what her problem is. Oh, gee, she shouldn't be working. Could be I just had a belly pain just before I was about to stand up there in front of you. People mind read all the time, right? Walking down the street, well, oh yeah, I know. We do that automatically, right? And oftentimes we think it's about us. So if I'm walking down the hall at work and I have a little frown, somebody will think, oh, I wonder what I did. Is she mad at me? I wonder. Could have been I just got off the phone, I got some bad news, or, you know, my check bounced. Who knows? Like, it could be anything, right? So it's about not mind reading and not jumping to conclusions. Those are negative thinking patterns, because then all of a sudden what started as, well, I wonder what her problem is, turns into, well, I don't want to hang out with her. And meanwhile, I'm oblivious. I had a stomach pain. Give me a break. Right? But we do it automatically. Magnification or minimization. You blow things way out of proportion, or you just make them shrink their importance, right? Similar to the disqualifying the positive. Self-comparison. Does anybody compare themselves to somebody else? Yes. Do we ever compare ourselves to somebody who's doing worse than we are? Not necessarily. This person has more money, they're thinner, they have a bigger house, they drive a better car, they went on this great trip. We do all these comparisons, and what does that make us do? Feel like crap, right? But we don't compare ourselves to the person who's struggling to make ends meet and does, you know, we don't say, oh wow, we're doing better. We always compare up and then we fail, right? And so the whole idea is just to kind of live your own life. Stop the comparison game. It doesn't do anything but make you feel bad, right? The shoulds, the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. Oh, I should have done that. You should do this. Whoever likes to hear those words pointed at them? Well, you should. I just want to say, no, I won't do it just because you said you should. Right? It's the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. It's demanding and it's negative. So change the shoulds, especially to yourself. Oh, I should have done that. To, well, how can I do that different the next time? Instead of making it like you're a failure, right? Anytime the word should comes out of my mouth, I just feel like I'm swearing, especially if I do it to my kids. If I hear that, I think, ooh, I gotta rephrase that. You know, you should. And I think, oh, no, there's no way should is positive. There's nothing positive about it. Blaming. So you blame others for your pain, or you blame yourself for every problem that goes on. Blame doesn't work either, whether you're blaming others or people are blaming you or you're blaming yourself. So staying away from the blame. It's nobody's fault. Live your own life. Let everybody else live their own life as well, right? Accept the consequences for your choices if you've made a choice, but don't turn it into blame. Turn it into something that you've learned from and do it better the next time. Labeling and mislabeling. That's another one of my pet peeves. In my work, you know, I hear labels all the time. And in my opinion, labels are for soup cans. They're not for people. So you don't label people, she's a, he's a, whatever. And in my line of work, I hear all the time people say, he's bipolar. And I think, he is not bipolar, he is Brian. And he has bipolar the same way as his green eyes, and he has brown hair, and he has pigeon feet, I don't know, whatever. But it's not who people are.
Well, it would be the same as saying he is cancer.
Exactly, absolutely.
He is diabetes.
He is a heart attack.
He's a heart attack.
Right? It's the same
Has a heart
thing.
condition, or she has
Yes,
lung
exactly.
disease.
Exactly, you got it right on. And that's one of the things I have to educate my clients too. I'm this. I say, no, you're not. You are so-and-so and you have this. It's not who you are. It's part of what you have. The same way you have 2 feet and 2 arms and whatever. So
Define you completely.
that's right. And so when we label other people, that's a negative that we're putting into our head and also to their head. And personalization, you know, taking things personally, or you know, thinking that everything is a reaction to you. Number one, people most times are not thinking about you, and really you're just thinking it's all about you, and really it's not really about you, right? But it's that whole perception thing again. You know, somebody says something and you think, oh, you know, you take it so personally. It's not about you, it's about them. And even if they do say something that's hurtful about you or to you, it's still not about you, it's about them and their negative space. So you can't take it on. You develop a thick skin, you know, as a parent of a teenager, I'm so sorry I'm picking on you again, but you develop a thick skin and you can't take things personally because they aren't about you. They're about them. So if you can remember those words too, it's not about me. It's not about me. It's about them. It's about them. So how do we change these little suckers? You change your mind. First of all, it's about the self-awareness piece that I told you about. Sometimes people have no idea they're even doing it. They have no idea that it can be done any different. So one of the ways you can get people to notice their patterns, and some will do it and some won't, might be journal writing, might be writing in the different thoughts that you have for a day. Or if you're really a keener and you carry your notebook around, you say, okay, I noticed out of those 10, 12 cognitive distortions, I do 8 of those, and you decide you want to work on that, have a little notebook. If something comes in your head and you hear yourself saying never, always, should, could, would, maybe start writing those down, and you can pay attention to where's their pattern. Is it a certain time of day? Is it a certain situation? Is it at work? Is it at home? Now, for those people like me who don't write things down, never had a journal. I think I have 6 journals that I started over 10 years that have 1 page because I'm all keen and then I never do it again for another year. I do thought stopping. And I've done this since I had depression. I was going to say diabetes. Since I had depression. And what I do is when a negative thought comes into my head, and sometimes I drive a lot for my job, so that's when, you're in the car, your thoughts go. And I started with the negative thought. I say right out loud, stop. Just stop. And when you hear yourself saying that 2, 3, 4 times in a drive, then you know there's something going on you need to attend to. Now, people, you might not want to do that in the bank, or you might not want to do that in the grocery store. You might do that in your head if you're in public, but in my car, I say it out loud and I say it loud. I say, stop. Just stop. And it really does put a roadblock on those thoughts because they just feed on it. Right? You have one thought and it starts, oh, and this, and then it goes into this, and then what about that? And then it just goes like wildfire, shoo! And pretty soon you're thinking, oh, I feel like crap. I wonder why I feel so bad. It's because of that thought that you didn't stop in its tracks. Right? So say it out loud, stop. I know people at the stop signs might look at you funny, whatever. Just pretend you're stop. Replacing negative statements. So now you've recognized that you're doing this. So then how are you going to stop it? You're going to replace it with something better. So what you're going to do is like milder wording. When your parents always said, don't say hate. There's a reason for that, right? Hate's a strong word. No, you don't say hate. You say, I don't like. And it's true. They just didn't know it was a mental health thing, right? I don't like is a milder word. That's like in the hospitals when somebody will say, what's your level of discomfort? As opposed to, how much pain are you in? See the difference? It seems like there's so many people, I go to different things and I see them and they're like, oh my God, she's so Oprah-esque. Whatever. It's true. It's true. Our brain works like this. And so we can change the way our brain works. So talking about a little bit milder words. Changing the negative to neutral or positive. So situation comes up, you're having lunch with somebody and they call and cancel a few minutes before. Well, you can say like, well, she was just so rude to do that. Or you can say, whoa, I have a half an hour for you. I'm just going to go do whatever. Right? You can change it from the negative of, oh, I'm so bummed. Or like when it rains. I have to fight with this one. People are like, oh, it's raining. And then there's always one person who says, oh, we need it. The garden needs it. And first you want to strangle them. And then you think, oh, that's probably a good way of looking at it. Right? You have no control over it. So changing it from a negative to a neutral or even a positive, which would be great. And changing self-limiting statements to questions. So things like, oh, I can't handle this. Oh, this is impossible to do. I can't do this. You think like, how can I handle this? How is this possible? How can I handle it better? How can I do? Instead of just, then you can't think of any solutions when you've said, this is impossible. Like, where do you go from there? So just change it to how is it possible? And then work on a strategy from there. And changing your body. And this isn't about thin. This is about the mind and body experience. So progressive muscle relaxation. Has anybody ever done that? Oh, it feels so good. And so you can start. What I like to do is if I'm laying in bed, but you can do it sitting up or whatever, and I start from the bottom of my feet. You just tense your muscle, you let it go, and you just feel the difference between when it's tense, when it's relaxed. And you can do that all the way up your body, and you won't believe how your body feels after that. It's just so great. And I usually just kind of go up one side and down the other. And it just is such a relaxing way. If I'm having trouble sleeping or anything, I find that works really well. I'm usually asleep by the time I get back to my feet. Clearing your mind. So allowing yourself to mentally focus on a single word or a thought or an image. I have a little phrase that I say that I find repeating that over and over. It just helps to clear my mind of other things. It helps if you can reduce the noise and the distractions around you. But if you start to do it and then all of a sudden start doing your grocery list in your mind, that's okay. Just go back and start again with a different word. That's what people sometimes they say, oh, I can't do it. I was doing the one word, and then all of a sudden I started thinking about, well, I should paint the ceiling, and I should, it's okay. You can still try it again and try it over. Visualization is kind of like a mental vacation. So you picture yourself, whether it's on the beach, the ocean, whatever, you can picture yourself in the place, and then you can smell the salt air, and you can feel the sand in your feet, and the more detail that you can give yourself, the more you're there. And it really is like a mental break from the world that you're in. And again, these are things that you can use in the morning before you go to work. These can be things that you use when you get home, when you're stressed, when you're anxious, whatever. Those are different techniques that you can try. Stretching, that's a good one. Let's just do that right now. Let's just play. Come on. Just stand up, and all you need to do is, we're not going to do yoga. I'm not going to make you on the floor. But just stretch. Do a good stretch. You've been sitting for almost an hour, right? Stretch your arms. Put your side to side. Doesn't that feel good? And so if you do that and do some stretching and loosen things up, you'll feel where all your tension is, right? You can feel it mostly in your neck. I find a lot of people from computers and chairs and things like that. So stretch. Do a little group stretch at work or at school if you need to. Meditation. Some people, it's kind of like a visualization, only maybe with a longer period of time. And you can also get meditations that are like that you can play on your iPod or whatever that are guided meditations. But just that, again, period of quiet and maybe reflection, but mostly just peace. That time of peace. And my favorite is the breathing exercises because number one, they're quick and they're cheap and they're easy and you can do them anywhere. You don't have to go to the gym to breathe, right? Part of what happens is we're also rushed that we don't do these really good deep breaths, right? We're like panting. So I want to do one more exercise, and it's really nice that you're playing along. So what I want to do is I just want to do 3 breaths. We do in through our nose, out through our mouth. Don't do too quick. I don't want you keeling over, like hyperventilating. And just see if you notice how you feel after just 3 breaths. Okay, so let's do it together. Can you feel that? Doesn't that feel good? One of the things that I do before I'm going to meet up with somebody who might be escalated, again to my teenager, is I take 3 breaths and I have her take 3 breaths. Because then you go from to, okay, now I can talk, right? It's amazing. So think if you did 10, how you'd feel. So those are things that you can do it anywhere, anytime, right? It's just a matter of getting yourself into practice. Before I do a presentation in front of you, it might not look like I'm nervous. I'm like doing those breaths like you wouldn't believe before I walk in the room. It just helps to kind of de-escalate, calm, everything's going to be fine. And it's cheap. That's what I like. So, mental health in the workplace. We're talking about the statistics, right? And if we went through the room, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and they had 20 back there. 4 people just in this room, right? I've already said that I had depression. So it's there. And breast cancer is 1 in 9. Okay, so that's to kind of give you the idea. If you're a room for 100 people, how many people are going to have mental illness, right? And mental illness isn't what you're thinking or what you were thinking, like the people on the bus or the people in the streets or the people on the whatever. Mental illness is you and me, right? It doesn't have a look. So that's the important thing to remember. So 1 in 5, so your coworkers, your friends, your family. Ignoring mental illness isn't going to make it go away. And recognizing that mental illness is not uncommon and changing the way we react, that just can only do positive things. Thank you. Including shorter recovery times for people, better job retention, and a happier workplace. You know, the statistics are staggering. People with depression, I wish I forgot to bring my book because I had that. Depression is the most easily treated of all mental illnesses. 80% of people who have depression don't get treatment. Part of that is because they were like me and they didn't realize that that's what it was. But part of it is the stigma that's involved, right? And 90% of people who are treated go back and live the regular, everyday life that they were living before. So that's just sad, you know, that you have people living, honest to God, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, because the feeling of being in that deep, dark pit is something that you don't want to experience, but it's also the feeling of shame and embarrassment and how dare I have depression? That whole idea. So there's a lot to it. And so it's really important that people understand that. And that's why I'm so vocal about it now. I don't want other people to have to go through that. And I did an article in the paper a couple of years ago right around women in wellness and just kind of described a little bit about my story. You would not believe the emails, the phone calls I got of people like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. First of all, I had no idea that that was you, but I had no idea that that's what it was. And so if you can recognize these symptoms in people that you love or in yourself, go talk to a doctor. Talking about job stress, because you guys all have job stress because you're all helpers. Helpers have job stress, right? Because we're always giving out to other people, so we want to make sure. The other thing, too, is around job stress that you see so much is, so the harmful physical and emotional responses that occur when the requirements of the job do not match the capabilities, but big-time resources or needs of the worker. Resources are a huge thing, and that's why we're seeing so many people stressed. There's cuts here, there's cut there, there's cut this, and people's workloads aren't getting cut any. It's the positions or the people that are there to support them. So that's one of the things that we're seeing. And we hear the words burnout and stress leave a lot now. But in my opinion, burnout and stress leave are just different words for depression or anxiety. They go hand in hand. And so trying to be able to work with. And we're trying to get some conversations going with employers as well, because a lot of times employees say, well, yeah, that sounds great, but who's going to talk to my employer about that? So that's where our focus is right now. So these are things that you can do, right, for job stress. Creating a balanced schedule. There are some clients that I work with that are more challenging and harder to be with than others, so I don't line them up back to back, right? Or if some people aren't doing well, I spread it out over the day. So that's kind of the thing. You analyze your schedule. The same thing about in the afternoon. I never schedule an afternoon meeting where I have to be coherent. I do that in the morning. So analyze your schedule. See what works best for you. All work and no play is a recipe for disaster. So trying to find a balance between work and home and not bringing your work home and trying to leave it at the door. You know, those are all things. Self-care. Does everybody do self-care? And that might be gardening, listening to music, yoga, running, reading, whatever. But if you're not taking 10 minutes a day at least to do some form of self-care, then you're setting yourself up for stress and burnout. Don't overcommit yourself. Do you have anybody in your office that comes screaming in at 1 minute to 9 because they've had this and this and this and they only had one more thing that they had to get done before they could, right? You overcommit yourself and you think, oh, I can squeeze one more thing into that. No. So trying to fit too much in the shoulds and the musts, figuring out what is the critical thing and what can be left behind. Trying to leave earlier in the morning. This is my own personal thing. I get up at 6:15. I don't have to leave my house till 8:20, but I do not like to rush. I want to just be able to take my time. I get to work early. I kind of ease into the day, and I have other coworkers that walk in at 1 minute too, and they're like right into it, and I think, oh, I couldn't do it. Now that's a personal choice, But I find even 10, 15 minutes to be able to take yourself from your one, take off one hat at home, put on your other hat, and the same thing when you're going home. Sometimes I take a detour. If I've had a rough day at work and my home is only 5 minutes away, I take the long way so that I can take off my mental health hat and put on my mom hat or my wife hat or whatever. So trying to not overschedule yourself and trying to leave yourself a little bit of wiggle room there. Taking regular breaks, like we said, working on the computer, stepping away. It's good for your eyesight, it's good for your mental health, it's good for the stretching. That's when you can do your stretching, when you do your little break, right? Taking your lunch hours, instead of eating at your desk, looking at your computer, doing your work. I know what you're doing. Prioritizing your tasks. So ABC list. A has to get done today. B, I'll get to that as soon as I can. C, maybe next week, right? So just doing the priorities, and don't look at the whole ABC list at one time, because then you're going to be overwhelmed, and that might make you just paralyzed and say, well, I can't do anything. There's just too much to do. And breaking the project into smaller steps. I always have a to-do list. Sometimes I put stuff on my to-do list after I've done it just so I can cross it off. Right? It's that feeling of accomplishment. Or I write down something that I know I can do in 2 seconds so I can cross it off. It's the whole thing. It's the whole mind thing, right? Delegating responsibility. You don't have to do it all yourself. If other people can take care of it, why not let them? And if you're going to delegate it, don't look over their shoulder to see if they're doing it right. Let them have it. Right? Somebody's covering their face back there. It's you don't have to control everything. And what you're doing is you're empowering other people, and you're taking a load of stress off yourself. And be willing to compromise. If you ask somebody to do something and they do it their way, then let them do it their way. Maybe their way, shockingly, will be better than your way. Right? And so be willing to compromise, or say, well, I like that part of it, but could we do this part of it? Be willing to compromise. You'll just make things a lot less stressful for yourself. So, improving our internal environment. Here's the whole Oprah thing again, but really it's the truth. So, developing a positive attitude toward life. You put stress in a favorable context. If you convince yourself that some of the stress is useful or necessary, then you're going to reduce the after effects. And using the power of positive thinking. Your attitude really is, one of my favorite quotes is, if you can't change your fate, change your attitude. Right? Because really, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with it? You're going to choose one way or the other. So people have control over how they choose to see things. And when you wake up in the morning, you're choosing, okay, it's going to be a shitty day or it's not. Right? You're choosing that. You just don't think about the fact that you're choosing it. Put things in perspective. That's the whole thing about what can we control and what can't we. And who can we control and who can't we. Right? So putting it into perspective. And identify what really is a crisis and what isn't a crisis. And you let go of the things that aren't a crisis, because there are going to be big issues in your life. Save up your energy to deal with those. Not everything is a crisis. Right? Positive self-talk. So it's that little tape recorder in your brain, tape recorder, CD player, iPod, whatever you want to call it. But it goes 24/7, and you get all those messages going through your brain. So they're either going to be positive or negative. It's up to you to turn off the negative ones and turn on the positive ones, right? So I can, not I can't. I can, positive versus negative. And positive thoughts about ourselves are just as realistic as the negative ones, but I'll tell you what, if I asked you to do 10 things you liked about yourself, you'd struggle a lot harder than if I said, write 10 things you don't like about yourself. You'd be like whipping those off like nothing, right? So it's all around the perspective. And optimism and humor. Life can be serious, but really we need to lighten up. We do. We need to lighten up. We can't take on everything that's wrong in the world. We cannot fix everything that's going on in the world. We need to focus on the good, and we need to focus on the positive. There's enough negative already, so let's do the positive. And I'll just tell you one quick story. One of the guys that I know was at Boston when the bomb went off. He was in the tent. He was being treated for dehydration, and he saw a lot of terrible things. But what he's chosen to do is focus on the compassion, the skill, the love, the coming together instead of all the negative things, and that he asked people to turn off the TV, turn off the news, and focus on the good. And that's what I would ask for you. Focus on the good. And if all else fails and none of these things work for you, then this is what you do. Your own personal stress reduction kit. Right? We have those all over the office. So, you bang your head here. That's the only thing that you can do. So I'll just, got 2 minutes, 1 minute, I'll wrap her up. So we're back to the continuum. Stress can have a profound effect on our mental health. And good mental health can protect us from the harmful effects from stress. So people often think mental health is just simply the absence of mental illness, but it isn't. It's the presence of a feeling of well-being, knowing that you can cope with the challenges and everyday things in life. And it's the balance between all the aspects of our life. So our social, our physical, our spiritual, and our emotional. And we can all work on it the same way we work on our physical health. So good mental health is essential to good life. And there's all the different types of good mental health. So we can all build them one step at a time. And I think I'm just about done for time. Whew. Thank you.